I have seen an increased narrative on Sony being against indies. And you guys probably remember this exact picture. This was taken actually from the PlayStation 4 launch event where it was widely accepted as a phenomenal event. That's when Sony came out, basically did everything opposite of what Xbox was doing at the time, made the PlayStation 4's focus primarily on gaming first, came out with a lower price point, received a standing ovation, and went on to be one of the best selling consoles of all time. And it all really started with PlayStation support for indies, which at the time, there wasn't really a ton of support the way that Sony was giving it to it. Microsoft was starting a little bit, but not the way Sony did. And that was a very different time back then in 2013. But the narrative has shifted significantly. And I'm going to talk about that today, right after you guys subscribe. So here's the deal. Then I don't understand where, gaming journalism kind of comes from sometimes. I feel like there's this very odd, and I've been at animosity, I should say, with gaming journalism for a really long time. Now, I'm going to pick on Jeff Grubb today, and I'm just going to caveat by saying I love Jeff Grubb. I follow him on Twitter. I watch his live streams. I think he's one of the good ones. I think he got it wrong here, and I think a lot of other journalists got it wrong too. And I don't understand why the hip new meta is to pick on Sony, but that's where we are. And for every one of them, there's going to be a Sony pony, such as myself, saying, wait a minute, hold up. Sony's not as bad as you make them out to be. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to focus on this article. And I do want to mention it's very well written. Highly encourage you guys to read it. The description will be the link will be in the description box below. But what it really boils down to is this man right here. This is Jim Ryan, okay? Now, Jim Ryan and Sony are one and the same because he is Sony at this point. He runs the PlayStation division. He is the guy. Jim Ryan, or his league, his cabinet, whatever you want to call them, has done some things that have angered fans, one of which is the supposed rumor, leak, review, whatever you want to call it, from Jason Schreier, which I did a lot of in-depth coverage on, about Days Gone 2. And how Days Gone 2 actually is not proceeding because Sony felt it wasn't profitable enough, and Sony only wants to go after what, Jeff and a lot of the other gaming journalists are referring to as these kind of like big hits. They're drifting away from smaller games is the way that Jeff actually posts it here. The idea that the new meta in journalism is to say that Sony doesn't really support indies anymore, and Sony would rather spend money on big hit games. Like the next God of War sequel is significantly more important than investing money in something smaller, which is odd to say, but that's what's getting clicks right now. It's hip to not like Sony. We see this pendulum in politics. We see this pendulum in sports teams. We see this pendulum everywhere. Sony owned last generation, period, straight up. In sales and games and every possible metric you could evaluate, Sony PlayStation 4 soundly destroyed Xbox One. Things are a little different now. PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, particularly backed by Game Pass, particularly backed by some of the initiatives that Xbox is doing with Project X Cloud, for example, has really kind of brought Xbox back into the fold, which is great. Competition sells, and I've always said competition is important. But Sony's key tenant, one of their key tenants, was on the indies, and that's really kind of where they got their push during the PlayStation 4 debut, the standing ovation, the lower price point, everything. As a matter of fact, their first big PlayStation Plus game was Contrast and Resogun, largely because they didn't have a whole lot at launch. Most consoles don't. This has been nothing new since the beginning of time, or in your Nintendo. Yeah, so it was two indie games that came out. Both Contrast and Resogun were phenomenal games, and both of them went on to really get a lot of awards and accolades and publicity because of that. Now, we've gotten into an era where, according to Jason Schreier, Days Gone 2 has been pulled. The team is being disbanded and moved on to other things, largely in fact that it got a bad Metacritic score and it didn't sell well. And I've been very critical on the launch of Days Gone. I've done many videos on the launch of Days Gone and how buggy it was on both the PlayStation 4 and the super high powered, at the time at least, PlayStation 4 Pro. Then, as time went on, it got better and better and better and patched. And now it was a phenomenal experience on PlayStation 5 with the increased frame rate. And it's looking to be even better experience on the PC. I just did a video on that last week talking about how phenomenal it looks on PC and how I want to buy it and play it again with ultra wide support and my big headphones. And just, I really want to enjoy this world again. So, very different tale from what the launch was to where we are now, but numbers are important. And according to Sony, numbers weren't good. And as a result, the narrative now, Jim Ryan doesn't want to support smaller games. The narrative, Jim Ryan doesn't want to support indie games. And that's what Jeff goes on to say in his article here. One example of this is PlayStation's shrinking relationship with smaller indie games. At the start of the PlayStation 4, Sony embraced indies as a way to fill out the console release schedule while the company developed its own projects. Now the publisher is less willing to associate itself with $20 or $30 indie games. The PlayStation website does list some notable indie games like Oddworld, Bugsnax, and Maquette. And by the way, I'll have a review of Maquette later this week. That's not what Jeff said. That's just me telling you that I will legit have a review of it later this week. And each of those launched on PlayStation Plus. Sony still sees value in indie games when it comes to boosting the value of the subscription service. But this initiative is more limited than the first year of PS4, which helped launch indie exclusives like Resogun, Guacamelee, Towerfall Ascension, Velocity Transistor, The Swapper, Sports Friends, Hook'em, and more. This month, Resogun developed Housemarque is releasing roguelike shooter Returnal. Day one purchase for me. I will play the hell out of this game and I will have a review for it when it comes out. But that game, which is $70, shows that it is also indicative of the company's direction towards bigger games, even in the indie space. PlayStation is less likely to give indies their own showcase than the competition. That, I think, is the key, and that's what I wanted to focus on here. So the reason why, in my opinion, Sony has quote-unquote distanced himself from indies, which, let me just jump down really quickly. That's not true. If you go to the PlayStation Store, whether you go to the PlayStation Store blog, that's actually on the website, or you fire up your PlayStation, I keep saying PlayStation 4. PlayStation Store. One store, one fight, okay? If you go to the PlayStation Store website, or you open up the store on your PlayStation 4, or you open up the store on your PlayStation 5, you're going to see a tab or a box or a selection called Collections. PlayStation 5 does this really well. That's all I use now. I use my PlayStation 4 as a streaming machine, but to be fair, I did check it and it is there as well. And you will see all of these big blocks that you can click on. Editor's Choice, Superheroes, Essentials, whatever. And then they have a section called Indies. And it's just Indies. It's only Indies. It says PlayStation Indies. It's right front on the center of the screen. And they show it there. Yes, it is buried, I guess, in the store of the collections. Sony definitely isn't coming out doing anything like this anymore. They don't have to. Why do they not have to? Well, I pulled up good old, remember Summer Games Fest last year? Ooh, that was an event. But it actually did a really good job of showcasing just how many showcases there were. Now, a lot of these are there's actually more than was listed here, and I tried to find a good site that listed them all. I couldn't. I remember early on in COVID, as I was kind of nervous about what the future of my channel would look like because I was afraid of, limited news. I was covering some of these, and very quickly I was overwhelmed by just the sheer amount of just lame duck press conferences that there were, to the point that I said, oh, I'm good. I quit doing them. You had the Guerrilla Games Indie Showcase, which was a 3-day event. 3 days, which featured a bunch of games. You could not name 2 games from here that you remembered. It was a flood of the most monotonous, boring indie games known to man or woman. PC Gaming Show, which has devolved into a lot of really bad indie games, or for some reason, Age of Empires. I'm not really sure how they got associated with PC gaming, but hey, good for them. The Future Games Show, hosted by Games Radar, the Upload VR Showcase, the Steam Game Festival, which here is the Steam website, which is pretty much only indies at this point. I feel like a lot of these games, like 5D Chess, Dismantle, I don't know, have Dungeon Defenders Awakened, week of the 2,033 games on sale this week. Pretty much Steam is indie games now. Pretty much. That's okay. That's okay. They had their Summer Games Festival, which was a week long event. Then we had the I don't even know who Developer Showcase is. That must have been who that was. New Game Plus Digital Expo, the Bits Summit Gaiden, and another developer showcase. And that's it for his list. But trust me when I tell you, there was more and more and more and more. So going back to this article and in defense of PlayStation, and as Sony divorced themselves from indies, no, Sony is being bombarded with indies just like everyone else is. And they don't have to do showcases anymore because these people have figured out how to get together and make their own showcases. And the fact that Housemarque, which is a indie studio, don't ever be denied by that. Look at the games they've made. Trust me when I tell you they're a small studio. Are making a game Returnal. This is an indie game kind of branching out. I think $70 for any game is ludicrous, but I understand that they're selling it for a quote unquote full price because it's going to be a long experience. Just like Devolver Digital has dipped into more pricey games too. It's a thing that's happening. But Sony doesn't really have to spend money on that anymore because it doesn't make sense. And in this case, I got to defend Jim Ryan. I mean, the guy's smart. Look, you have Nintendo doing dedicated indie showcases. You have Xbox basically devolved into indie games or older games at this point. I always say swimming in a sea of sevens, right? You're swimming in 7 out of 10 games. A lot of them are indie games. I just got done playing another indie game from them the other night. Just did a review on it. I'm like, how many more indie games is Game Pass going to throw on? Well, a ton of them. You have this Steam, which is backed almost entirely by indie games. You have Jeff Keighley putting together his Games Fest, which is indie games, indie games, indie games. So when PlayStation 4 came out and they said they loved indies, they did. And they still do. However, back at the time, Sony was trying to make the argument that they love all games. And this was just one of many screens. Their entire press conference was dedicated to games. And it was done in direct contrast to what Xbox was doing when they came out with the dopey TV thing and the dopey Connect and all these stupid things nobody asked for. Sony came out and said, hey, we love games and we love indies, which obviously is a subset of gaming. And to show our support, we're going to throw out these games as part of Game Pass or as part of PlayStation Plus. And we're going to give you Resogun. We're going to build up this Housemarque studio because we believe in them. We're going to give you Contrast because it's something fun and different, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So this narrative that people are spinning, and I'm going to say journalists, I'm going to say holistically, and particularly Jeff, and like I said, I do love the guy. I think I respect his work a lot. But this narrative that Sony has turned their back on indies is just goofy. It's a smart business decision for them not to highlight indies, but definitely not Sony doesn't care about them. If Sony didn't care about them, they wouldn't have a dedicated section on their page. They wouldn't feature Destruction All-Stars and Bug Snacks and Oddworld with Maquette as part of their PlayStation Plus games, which they had to pay for. They're clearly doing that, and Jeff is right, to bolster up their PlayStation Plus numbers, but they're featuring games that are less known because, why? Because they still do love indies, because they still care. So when you guys read, you YouTubers, when you guys out there read these articles, and I'm going to say it one more time, read this one below. It's a very good read. Keep that in mind. The narrative is shifting, it's spinning, it's twisting. Microsoft is going to be the Cinderella company for now because of Game Pass, and everybody's in love with Game Pass, and Game Pass gets even better, and EA Play, and xCloud, and this one and that one. Yes, I get it. Game Pass is good. I like it. I'm subscribed. I'm an Ultimate member. I've been an Ultimate member since the day it was launched. However, that doesn't mean to say that PlayStation is not a fan. And I think Jim Ryan's taking a lot of heat, and I'm going to defend the guy in this one. So we'll see where this video lands off. Maybe a lot of pluses, maybe a lot of minuses, but that's my well laid out argument in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tabs for you guys. So leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this and all things Sony. I hope you guys found this video informative or interesting, or it made you think just a little bit. If not, that's okay too, because there'll be another one tomorrow. That's it for me. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.